Hello everyone, my name is Andy, also known as Kwok. I wanted to take some time today to do an actual devlog of CloseCall. Some of my previous videos were more like short clips and streams where I don't really share or say much in detail, so here I will share some history and talk about where this project is going. Flashback to December 2019. I was working on two smaller projects, Overdrive and Crime Wave, fueled by my interest for programming. Decided to expand my knowledge in Unity and wanted to work on a 3D project. Before programming, I had experience working in the auto industry and had a decent knowledge of vehicle mechanics, so I wanted something racing related. I decided to pick something that I had a lot of love for, and that game was Split Second. After reading hundreds of comments on split-second videos on YouTube wishing for a sequel, I decided to take that on for myself. I would make a split-second spiritual successor. First, I was experimenting with wheel colliders and vehicle physics. Eventually, I learned that Unity's wheel collider will get the work done, but requires some upper-level logic for it to function as intended. Instead of having me develop this myself, I decided to look for a vehicle physics system online in the Unity Asset Store. After reviewing a couple of options, I decided to pick Realistic Car Controller V3. Realistic Car Controller V3, or RCC for short, contained a lot of features that would help me move the game forward. I didn't have to worry about programming most of the vehicle's physics. Now that I had a base for vehicle physics, I set myself to work on power play equivalents in our game. If you don't know what power plays are, it was what sets Split Second apart from other racing games. Power plays let you blow up the track or activate shortcuts. However, in CloseCall, I wanted to expand this idea to include vehicle-mounted weapons. So I had to come up with a unique name for this mechanic. I ran through several ideas for names: track changers, track breakers, line disruptors, field changers. I ended up choosing field breakers, the name coming from a combination of motorsport slang field, which stands for the racing competitors, and breakers for breaking the competitors up. I created an object that contained several triggers. One was the potential trigger. It registers when vehicle has a potential to be blasted. And the trigger trigger. The trigger would register vehicles when they can blow up the potential vehicles. The main field breaker, or FB object, would check these vehicles, and if they satisfy certain requirements, they would get a trigger sent to the vehicle so the vehicle AI or player can activate them. After prototyping the system and being satisfied with the results, I decided this was something our team should work on. I saw a high demand for this game and decided I could create a community and have that drive us forward. I began to draw out the CloseCall master design document. I saw this spiritual successor as a combination of Split Second, Gran Turismo, and Midnight Club 3. I would take the action and TV showpieces of Split Second, combined with the semi-simulation aspects of Gran Turismo and the customizability of Midnight Club 3. After I had planned everything, I decided to start sharing about the project. I posted comments on YouTube videos, fan pages, and even the Split Second Discord. I started to get a small following going and invited them all into the Kinetic Games Discord server. Now, Kinetic Games was a small team, about 4 of us in total, made up of entirely volunteers. I was a self-taught programmer, and Andy, Hilaire, Sarina, Vail, and Kevin Hernandez were students at Bloomfield College in game design programs. We were a small indie team with basically no funding. It is now March 7th, and our first game demo for CloseCall, titled 0.20, was available to play at Winterplay Expo in New York City. We had customers compete to beat the best time to win a Hot Wheels car. We had a competition every hour, and it was a blast. Around the same time, we released a build for our Discord server to play, and the feedback was amazing. Since then, we added update after update. We created our first indie page on GameJolt and used it to host our builds. On March 15th, 2020, build 0.21 was released, which features a photo mode, new vehicle called the Ryu Celeste, which is based on the Toyota Celica, and a bunch of bug fixes. On April 12th, 2020, we released build 0.23 with a new vehicle, the Durant Pioneer, which is based on the Chevy Blazer, with extra features and bug fixes. We also released build 0.25 on May 15th, 2020. With this update, we added missiles, nitrous, and new engine customization. You can now change your supercharger, fuel system, spark system. You can import custom liveries. You can also change your tire for better traction. And now every vehicle has a different front and rear drag downforce calculation. Now, somewhere along this time, we also started and shared our Patreon page. Now, in its entire lifetime, we ended up with $70 at the highest total pledge. However, this was nowhere near enough to support the entire team developing the game, as we pulled funds every quarter or every 3 months, and it was then distributed evenly between us. I opted out and decided to divide it amongst the rest of the team, which ended up being around $17 to $25 per volunteer every 3 months. I decided that I would use the project as an opportunity to advance my skills and develop the game enough to grab people's attention to help with funding the game. That means more updates, more update posts, and more exposure. In June 2020, I decided to leave my current job to pursue the project full-time. At this time, our Patreon page was not giving us the money we needed. I decided to take this project on full-time using my own money as an investment. And what a huge undertaking it would be, as this allowed for one of the biggest updates to the game yet. On July 10th, 2020, build 0.35 was released. And with this update came a new paint color system called Pro Car Paint Shader by Boundary Studio. I found this asset in the Unity Asset Store. Now, originally the shader only supported two-tone color shifting, but with some reverse engineering and code analysis, I was able to include a third color in the shader. It also supported giving car paint different surface types like steel, matte, gloss, metallic, pearlescent, and chrome materials. This update also included new vehicle upgrades, such as body kits, vinyls, rims, intake air manifolds, engine internals, exhaust, drivetrain, front-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, all-wheel drive, or all-wheel drive with adjustable front and rear torque, steering, brakes, sport and off-road suspensions, tires, rims, wheel widths, diameters, and tire profiles. This update also included a save system and a team system, featuring the first team in the game, CC test drivers. Now, this update also included a large amount of bugs due to incorrect conversion of units, as most of this data was converted from a string as they were stored in a simple text file in the game. Data that read 1.2 ended up turning into 1,2 or 12 when converted, causing small increments of value like a 20% increase turned into a 100 to 1200% increase. So people who were testing the game in Europe got vehicles that were upgraded to have millions and millions of torque. Working heavily with the community for 2 days, I released build 0.35.1, which fixed all the issues. I had to go back and make sure all my conversions from and to floats were using invariant culture. While I was updating everything else, I also spent some time figuring out the AI. At first, I used a simple game object called a track node, with a script that keeps track of previous nodes, next nodes, and possible shortcut or field breaker nodes. I also had a track manager that got a list of all the nodes and assign and change the name of the nodes depending on what kind of track it is. So it would automatically change the name of a regular track node to shortcut node if it ended up being one of the shortcuts. Now, the issue came when the vehicle AI started driving toward these nodes. It was impossible to fine-tune them and have them drive nice and steady with this setup. After a month of research, my solutions were not working, and it became extremely frustrating. I decided to go to the asset store to see if anything there could help me. I ended up finding something called IRDS, or Intelligent Race Driver System, and it looked really professional. I decided to get the IRD source version, which was about $200, as I needed to make sure the system played nicely with field breakers and shortcuts. I-ilias was amazing to use. Making a racetrack was ridiculously easy. I-ilias's track builder had tons of visual feedback. It can build tracks with outer limits and also create a racing line for AI to follow separately. After rebuilding the starting dock level, a ton of time was spent diving into the source code so that the game's field breaker system, like track switches and shortcuts, would work nicely with I-ilias's sub-track system. After spending a lot of time figuring out I-ilias's AI logic and modifying it, I eventually made it how I wanted it to work. AI would randomly choose an alternate path. If a node had a connection to a shortcut, it would check that subtracks variable, called isOpen, to determine if it was an option. It will also check the node's variable, isPriority, to divert all AI through this path like a track switch. A month later, build 0.40 was released on August 14th, 2020, with the new AI system, extra rims, extra rim paint options, and a new vehicle, the Ryu Ultra 3, based on the Toyota Supra Mark III. However, it was clear even with the new AI system, there are still some issues and values to be tweaked, as all drivers behaved the same. This would be something I look into later using I-ilias's driver system. It is now October 2020. Around this time, Phasmophobia was getting quite popular, and they had a UK studio. And their studio was also called Kinetic Games. Because of this, we started receiving a bunch of messages in Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter regarding Phasmophobia. That's when we decided to rename ourselves Reactive Entertainment. The next update, 0.45.2, came out in November 4th. At this point, we were getting ready to feature our game as an early access on Steam, so our main goal was to get the core gameplay loop in. So this version had a career mode, calendar event system with different hosts, different rewards for completing in different positions. There was also a vehicle exchange area where players can buy new vehicles, and these vehicles were procedurally generated based on the in-game day. A new vehicle was also added, the Charfait LMP-H, which is based on the Porsche 919 Hybrid. We also redid our menu style to be more fanciful, and it's very reminiscent of Split Second's menu system. Then Build 0.47.1 came out on December 12, 2020. It featured changes to I-ilias's driver behaviors based on the vehicles they were driving. So AI with good brakes braked way later than a vehicle with bad braking capabilities. We also added a decal system to liveries where drivers can add sponsor decals. Race numbers and the driver's name will also be shown on the vehicle. We also improved the shockwave system in the game. Explosions now generate an area of disturbance around the explosion, and vehicles can enter this area and be disrupted by being pushed aside, like in Split Second. This update also included new music by our contracted composer Alex Spires, featuring a loop with 3 intensities. This allowed us to increase or decrease the game's intensity via the code. At the moment, it is only linked to the lap count, so the closer you are to finishing a race, the higher intensity music you will get. Meanwhile, patrons on Patreon were starting to lose interest, simply because these people were just friends who wanted to support for a couple of quarters. At this point, the pledges were only totaling up to $14 or so. Because of this, we decided to pull out of Patreon. It did not make sense to keep this up, especially when its rewards for patrons were not being managed at all. As the early access release on December 21st came closer, I was excited for the potential new players and exposure. At this point, I had used up around $3,000 of my own money to continue this project. Our wishlist numbers were around 100 at this time, and unsure of the conversion rate, I remained hopeful but also realistic. I just wanted some return of investment, and that would be good enough for me. While I was aiming for 0.50 for our early access, I knew I cannot keep delaying the game, so the early access version became 0.48.6. This included a basic rep system. You can gain reputation with team and sponsors. And this also included a new game experience by removing stock vehicles. So players will need to use the team vehicles to win races and use their earnings to buy vehicles. It also included 3 new vehicles: the Diode Iron Flux, which is based on the Tesla Cybertruck, the Huntley Corsair, which is the Dodge Charger, and the Bourne GTM, which is based on the Ford GT. Following this update, we needed to flesh out more of the vehicle systems to support things like electric engines and turbos, as the new vehicles were not accurately represented. The next update, version 0.49.3, released January 13, 2021. This update supported electric engines, turbos, and increased engine variation. This update also improved the vehicle handling physics and reduced the complexity of the steering system. We removed the different steering types. Instead, players will modify their cars to drift or grip manually instead of selecting a steering type. This new system made the cars far more enjoyable to drift. So, results from the early access build. As of January 18, 2021, we had 22 Steam sales. Gross sales numbers is $151, and the net is $116. We had 15 sales the first week, and on average 2.3 units sold every week. With these results and the resources and time available to the team and my own ability to live, we decided to work on a much smaller project. CloseCall is undeniably a huge passion project, riding on the expectation of its inspiration, and is a huge undertaking. I decided it would be best to slow down development and make it a second priority for Reactive Entertainment. There are still tons of things to do, mostly tweaks to AI, new tracks, and vehicle handling physics and tweaks. We hope to use our smaller projects to help us fund these bigger games. If you are interested in the game, you can try our demo versions up to 0.47.2 on GameJolt or itch.io, or you can buy our early access game on Steam. You can also join our Discord. Links will be in the description. I'm also asking you guys for help. What do you think I should do regarding this game? Should I set up another Patreon, Kickstarter, Indiegogo? Anyway, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for news about our next project.